Hey everyone, it's Twist65 again, and today we take a look at building a scenic divide on my N-scale layout. My layout is a variation of the North Carolina Central Railroad layout published in Model Railroader magazine in the early 1980s. The layout calls for a scenic break or divide between the passing/staging sidings on the back side of the layout and the working front side. In previous videos, I showed the basic layout and the addition of some risers on the layout. At that time, I also marked out where I roughly wanted everything else to go, including the scenic break. I also had in my mind's eye that I wanted the break to just be a large mountain ridge, something that you might find in the rolling hills of central Pennsylvania. Construction starts with gluing a section of 2-inch foam in place. I used leftover foam from what I cut down the tabletop and white PVA glue and toothpicks to anchor it onto the base. Most of the examples I've seen have had small hills that hold up a sheet of MDF with a sky painted on it. Sometimes the backside represents a completely different destination, or it could simply be an undecorated holding area. At this juncture in the building process, and based on my current skill level, I'm going with a holding or staging area on the backside. And I also don't have enough space for a walk-around layout. You can see that I used household paint cans to hold everything in place while it dried overnight. And here's the basic concept I was going for. The next stage of building is to get it to look a lot more like a ridge and less like a chunk of pink foam. We start with cutting lots of strips of cardboard. I didn't measure them, but I kept the strips to about 3/4 of an inch wide. Using hot melt glue, I added the strips to where I wanted the ridge to end on the front side of the layout and then bent them backwards to the top of the foam ridge. The interior of the ridge was filled with packing paper to help form the texture of the ridge between the cardboard strips, as well as to lend some support to the whole thing once the plaster cloth was added. Masking tape over the tracks and the turnouts is a very important step, as the next processes are very messy. Pre-cutting the plaster cloth really helps, as your hands are going to get wet and plaster covered. It just makes the whole process go a little quicker. And the process is pretty simple. Wet the cloth out completely, keeping it flat, don't let it wrinkle and fold over on itself, and then spread it out over the frame. There were a couple of places that I had to double up the cloth, but it's all a matter of the look you want for your scenery. Once you're satisfied with the way it looks, leave it to dry and cure overnight. I came back the next day and started to add Sculpt the mold. Sculpt the mold is a plaster and ground up paper product that you mix with water to get a cottage cheese-like consistency, and then it can be smoothed and pushed into places much like paper mache. The nice thing is that you can work it for 15 minutes or so to get the material pushed into places and cover up holes and build out little natural looking cracks and crevices. Just remember that the 15 minutes working time starts once you have it all wet out, so work in small batches. While the Sculpt mold was still workable, I took the opportunity to add some plaster rock faces I had previously made and pressed them into the Sculpt mold. I had to spend a little time softening up the transition from the hard plaster to the softer Sculpt mold, but hopefully they'll look fine once all the other scenic material is applied. This is the first time I've ever used this technique, so you and I get to discover together. Like the plaster cloth, this needs time to dry and cure before you can do anything else with it. I like to give it at least a full 24 hours, but longer is better. So at this point, I stepped away from the layout and gave it a full week to cure. But if, like me, you're stuck living in the southeastern part of the United States, you know the region is known for its high humidity and high temperatures. And the layout is being built in the back half of a garage bay, so there isn't any climate control. Which means when I came back later in the week, I found this nice, fine layer of pink mold growing all over the plaster. Time for an all-over coat of Kills paint to kill what started and to make sure the rest is protected from future growth. And with that, I'm calling part 1 complete. Look for part 2 to come out shortly, where we get a base coat on the ridge and tie it into the other project on the opposite side of the layout. If you enjoyed this video, found it educational, or just like following my progress, please do consider a like and a subscribe. It does help feed the algorithm. Until next time, thanks and happy hobby.